Sickle cell disease is the fastest growing genetic disorder in the UK, mostly affecting people of black heritage.
Giving blood, no. People rather give money, give anything than give blood.
We urgently need more blood donors from black communities to come forward because they're likely to have the blood type vital to treat this disorder. I caught up with Bukky Bolarinwa, who's the founder of Haima Health. Their slogan is simple: give blood, give life.
I think the easiest pitch is that people like me rely on it to live. Like, there are lots of people that rely on regular blood transfusions to live.
In this episode, we talk about her own battle with the disease and how in turn that informs her work.
I want more than just a piece. Wanna be heard from the west to the east. I worked in my craft and I prayed for my time on the scene. The man have never left my team. 19, learned the right creed. Nah, I'm not a right breed, but I might be. In my crease, Nikes, hit up my G. I'll still never sell out my theme. Well, you know about heritage, you go inherited. Don't chill with the snakes, but the flow's still venomous. Perspective is everything. So much lemonade, I don't know what a lemon is.
Bukky, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited about this conversation because in many ways it's a taboo one that we don't have enough of. And so I'm glad to be having it with you, someone who's got lived experience. You've also been working in this area for a while. So I just think it's going to be good for that very reason, right? So we just saw a video about what it is you do and, you know, sort of a tiny bit about who you are. How do you think about yourself if you had to describe who you are?
This is deep. I didn't know it was gonna be
We're getting straight
so
in.
deep. So who am I? It's like an existential question.
Yeah. Are we even here right
Are we-
now?
Like, what are we? I don't know. I guess I'm Bukky, and the thing I'm most passionate about is sickle cell advocacy and blood and all the things that come with it, health inequalities, all this good, really exciting good stuff. And it's kind of come from my experiences growing up and understanding that, you know, certain things that I've been privileged to have, a lot of people don't have, and trying to think of, okay, how can I do my little tiny bit to kind of shape people's experiences in this space.
Yeah, it's so interesting because two things come to my mind, or not even two things, one major question, which is often why I try and ask people who work in advocacy is whether they chose the advocacy or if the advocacy chose them.
Yeah.
So when you think about the work you're doing now, do you feel like you chose it or did it choose you?
I don't know, you know, but I think one thing that's for sure is that I never thought of myself as an advocate for a long time until a friend of mine, Nura. So Nura, he had sickle cell. Unfortunately, he passed away. And so he really taught me everything I know about advocacy because I learned by watching him when we started out, you know, in Nigeria, going to schools, kind of like what you do, talking to kids about sickle cell, talking to them about like not discriminating against people with sickle cell, talking to them about genotype and so on. And at that point, I just used to watch him, you know, and you know, just be like a voice for this particular cause. And just watching him is when I realized actually, okay, this person is an advocate. And slowly over time, I found my voice. And then I guess now I can call myself an advocate. But I definitely didn't come out like seeking to be an advocate. I think I just fell into it, to be honest.
And what's your sort of story with discovering, you know, because, you know, it's funny because during the George Floyd time period, we did a conversation when I was reflecting on when I was younger. And I think the question I asked, or I think someone asked, or someone asked me was, when did I first discover I was black? And I was like, this is interesting because obviously you don't wake up like I'm black when you're young. There's a day that something happens and you're like, oh, I'm different.
Yeah.
So with you with sickle cell, can you think back to that day? Like, what was it that made you realize that, okay, I'm different. I have something going on that's different to other people.
That's a very interesting... Wow, you asked really great questions. No one has ever asked me that before. These are amazing questions. No, I mean, thinking back now, I think it was probably when my parents told me that I had sickle cell. You know, as a child, like, you're different, but everybody's different. Like, I grew up with siblings and everyone was different. So I didn't really feel like I was that different. Certainly not anything that stood out. I did remember a particular incident, and I was talking about this yesterday, is that we had something called inter-house sports in Nigeria, where, you know, the kids just compete in different sports, and I went and stupidly did sack race. I don't know if you guys do that.
We know sack race,
So I did that, and obviously I came last, and I also had like super intense pain in my leg for weeks. Like I almost couldn't walk, kind of thing. So what I started to realize as I was growing up, and this is, I want to say I was in primary 3 here, so probably I was around 7.
Yeah.
I started to notice that when I would do things like that are like exerting, afterwards I would fall sick. And then also if I was very, very excited about something like my birthday, I remember a particular birthday, I think I was in primary 3 or so, and then I had like a cake in class and I was so excited, played everything. Afterwards when I got home, I was sick. So I started to notice those things, but I didn't really think anything of it. I think it really clicked when I was around 13 or so, when my parents actually sat me down and were like, listen, you have this thing. You can't keep like doing things like everybody else. You're different and so on. So I think it was really at that age that realization came. And then obviously as you grow older as well, you start to kind of know your body, understand the disease, and, you know, kind of adjust your life to fit it, basically.
Yeah. How do they break it down to you? I'm just wondering, did they just say you have sickle cell and here's what it means? Or, because I imagine they must have told you so that your young mind could understand it and not the full extent of what it means.
Yeah. So it was actually my dad that had that conversation with me. My mom just sat quiet. I think maybe my mom wasn't ready to tell me, but my dad, maybe, or vice versa, I don't know. But my dad was basically telling me as a warning that you have to do things differently. You can't continue to, like, if my brothers and my sister were like riding bicycle, for example, I want to do it. It's normal. Like you are a child, you have siblings and so. So I think the way they told me was like a warning, like, listen, you're different. You need to act differently. You need to not do things the way others are doing it. And the main thing I remember them always used to say is don't get overexcited. That was always my trigger. If I was too happy, it was usually happiness. As a child, you know, something is happening, maybe like there's a birthday party and everybody's like dancing and going crazy, then I would obviously do the same thing. And they just kind of had to have that conversation with me to basically say that you need to temper down. Because I'm a very sociable person. I'm an outgoing person. It was just my personality. But I think maybe they noticed that maybe my personality and my body were not really matching. So it was their way of just basically saying that, listen, you need to like always like calm things down. But obviously it still took me many, many, many years to like learn, you know, truly about the disease and myself and what my limitations are. Yeah,
it's hard because it reminds me of, or it feels as though they're almost advocating stoicism to you as a child, like don't be too high, don't be too low, just be in the middle. And
but it's impossible for a child.
Of course, I was gonna say, I can imagine how difficult it must be as a child to be thinking, you know, everyone's having fun, because I think one of the hallmarks of childhood is literally getting too excited all the time and learning how to kind of rein it in and how to balance things. So I can only imagine how difficult that must have been. So you grew up in Nigeria, then you came to the UK. Yeah. Was it because of the sickle cell you came to the UK, or was it for something else?
I just came for uni.
Okay.
I came for college when I was like 17, and then uni.
Yeah. And so when you got, was it when you got here that you started Haima Health?
No. Way later. So I went to uni here, moved back to Nigeria, and then when I got to Nigeria, I knew that I wanted to do something to support people living with sickle cell. So my friend Nkechi started this organization called SCAF, the Sickle Cell Aid Foundation, and then I joined her up with her, and we did a lot of sickle cell advocacy. And so it's in doing sickle cell advocacy that I realized that, you know, one of the main issues for a lot of people with sickle cell is blood, right? Because you need to have regular blood transfusions for a lot of people, and there just never enough blood, and there's so many issues around access and so on. And so that's what kind of spurred me to start it in around 2015, 2016. But I had been doing like sickle cell advocacy and other sickle cell work for like a little bit before then.
I'm just thinking of some of our listeners or even viewers who may be thinking, maybe they're too ashamed to ask, like, what is sickle cell? What does it actually involve? Because like a lot of, you know, diseases, when folks hear it, they just think, oh, it's terrible, you know, it's bad, and then they don't really investigate further. So obviously I know we can't go through the whole history, you know, and it might affect different people differently, but if you had to summarize, what would you say? What is it?
No, I mean, first things first, it's very important not to be ashamed to say you don't know something. Like, there are so many diseases in the world. Even me, it's not as if I know all the diseases.
Yeah.
I only know the ones that, I know. But sickle cell is an inherited blood disorder, and it happens when a child inherits two faulty genes, one from each parent, which is the S gene, and they have what they call the disease. So you can have one S gene, which means that you just carry the trait. So maybe your genotype is AS or something like that. And then if you inherit two S genes, then you have SS, genotype SS, which is what I have. And that means you have the full disease. But there are very different variants of the disease, and there are loads of different types of genotypes and all those kinds of things. But that's just a simplified way. It's an inherited blood disease, and what it basically does is, because your normal red blood cells are round like a donut shape, but mine are sickled shaped like a C. And what that means is that oxygen doesn't flow properly through your blood, and that causes pain in different parts of your body, usually your joints. And then it can also cause a host of complications like stroke, things like avascular necrosis, leg ulcers. It affects virtually every part of your body because blood is in every part of your body. So it's basically like the thing that your blood is supposed to be in all around your body, it's deficient basically, and that can show up in many different ways. So it's quite a very serious condition, and it has so many variants for people. So you have some people with sickle cell who can live virtually normal lives and do virtually everything, and then you have some people with the same disease who are in hospital basically.
I had a friend who was always in hospital, and I wondered, and it also always made me wonder, like, is it something that can be cured, or do you just have to manage it, or sort of?
There are cures now. So there are two main cures. There's the bone marrow transplant, which is basically if you find a match, it can either be a matching sibling or it can be a stranger. They will swap your bone marrow, and then your bone marrow will start producing normal red blood cells, and that's essentially a cure. There's also a stem cell transplant, which is similar, but they use stem cell instead of bone marrow. And then there's a brand new therapy called gene therapy, which has only started in the last kind of 8 years or so, where they essentially edit your genes and edit out the faulty gene that causes the sickle cell. But that one is still in trial, although I know some people that have gone through the trial. So there are cures now, but for the vast majority of people, the cure is just out of it. You just have to manage it.
Why is a cure out of it?
So many reasons. Number one, bone marrow transplant. The first thing is finding a match. Most people will not have a match. For example, I don't have a match. So if you don't have a match, that's part of the reason why they created the gene therapy, because it eliminates that need for a match. But again, the gene therapy is just in trial phase. We can be another 20 or 25 years before it's actually rolled out as a proper therapy. And then also for those that have a match, bone marrow transplant is very evasive. You have to go through chemotherapy. A lot of people die in the process of trying to.
Really?
It's a very serious. A bone marrow transplant, they'll kill off all your current cells and then try and replace it and so on. So it's not for everybody. And if you've had sickle cell disease, and sometimes if you've had too many complications, you won't be a candidate for it.
Wow.
And then also it's the cost, right? Average bone marrow transplant is about $70,000 to $80,000.
Sorry, what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
I mean, only a very specific kind of person could afford that.
Yeah. So you can already think of all the barriers, like first have a match and you have this and you have that. So yeah, it's out of reach for most people.
Wow.
They do it on the NHS now for kids.
Yeah.
So if like a child meets certain criteria, have a matching sibling, and they might consider a child for it, but yeah, it's just out of reach for most people.
Wow.
So you just have to manage it. So most people with sickle cell, you just have to manage it for the rest of your life.
I'm so glad you're saying this, because I think for a lot of people, you're so right. Like, you think and you know almost what affects you the most. So if you don't have this, like, this is my first time hearing some of this. And my mum works in the health industry.
Yeah. I'm sure she'll know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to send her this episode.
Yeah.
So, Mum,
cool.
if you're listening, I hope you enjoy this.
Hi, Mum.
No, this is something that she probably talks about day in, day out that I just don't know about, and I didn't know that. I mean, I do have a question for you, which is personal, but I would love to get your perspective on it, which is how you think about this, because it is something inherited. So you haven't done anything to, maybe you didn't eat right or you didn't diet. This is not like a lot of people get into the NHS because of their dietary decisions. This is something that's inherited. Have you ever, I imagine you might have kind of wrestled with that, thought about that, made kind of peace or sense of the fact that it's inherited?
No. I mean, I think like with any disease, so for example, if you get cancer, I mean, you don't do anything in particular to get it, or any most like conditions. And I think also because I was born with it, I've had a lot of time to like learn how to live with it and learn how to manage it. And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine. She's recently developed a health condition, and she's really struggling to manage it because she had come from a position where she was very strong, she was super fit and, doing all these things. And now she can't do some of those things that she used to do. And we were kind of comparing, like, is it worse to have like lived super healthy and then now start struggling with a health condition? Or is it worse to have lived with it all your life and not know kind of anything different? Like, I don't know what it's like to not have sickle cell, that this is the only life I know kind of thing. So I guess, I've had time to just...
Yeah, it's cool. I guess maybe the way you're saying it almost sounds as though when people do the whole, what does it feel like to be an only child?
Yeah. I don't know.
I am the only child. Like, I have no clue. I remember reading once, because you spoke about, how essentially when two people come together, their blood type, SS, if you have a dominant gene, a recessive gene, so on and so forth. Yeah, I know some stuff. How that's what might contribute or be a contributing factor.
Yeah.
I remember reading online about kind of a couple who said that after they went on a date, they went on one date and they were like, oh, this might work. And the girl messaged him immediately, like, what's your blood type?
Yeah.
Is that something we need to see more of? I read it. I didn't really think much about it. But now that you're speaking, I'm like, maybe we need to have a lot more conversations about blood types.
Genotype,
And do you think, or genotype, sorry, is it blood type incorrect?
Blood type is different. That's more like your blood group, like O positive, O negative, and so on. Your genotype is to do with your genetics and what you're born with.
So so do we need to have those conversations more? And if there are two people who absolutely love each other, but their genotypes just don't match, like what would your kind of...
No, this is your question.
I'm sorry.
Just like
attacking you. No, but I think there's such important...
Like, yeah.
Yeah, and again, you can refuse to answer, of course. Like,
no.
You don't have to...
So the first question is around whether you think people should talk about it in their first date and things like that. I think, so when we started our advocacy, actually, in Nkechi and I and Scarf, we used to do a lot of work around know your genotype before you date. Ask those kinds of questions. And part of the reason we did that was because we wanted people to kind of, especially young people. So we used to target like NYSC camps and things like that, universities, and try and tell people it's a big thing in Nigeria because such a large percentage of the population carry the sickle cell gene in Nigeria.
Why is that? I don't want to start on a tangent.
So that goes back to the history of sickle cell. So they think that the history of sickle cell has to do with genetic mutation to the malaria in those regions. So that's why you find that if you lay the map of malaria endemic countries in the world, it also aligns to the map of sickle cell. So Nigeria is number one, followed by India, and then a lot of the West and Central African countries, some Eastern African countries. It's very interesting, actually. If you look at it, a country like South Africa has almost no sickle cell, versus if you just go up a little bit to like Uganda, and it has so much. So it's a lot about like epidemiology and all that stuff if you're interested in that. But Nigeria has a lot of sickle cell, and so a lot of people are more aware that it's a conversation they need to have. I guess if you're in the UK, maybe not as much because Black people in the UK are such a mix of people from different backgrounds. But it's definitely important if you know that you carry the trait, that it's a conversation that you should have with somebody that you're potentially talking to. The problem in the UK is that a lot of people don't know if they carry the trait. And if you want to test, it's a bit of a cumbersome process. You have to go to your GP and your GP has to refer you to a main hospital and all those kinds of things. I've had this from people who have moved here and they wanted to. But you'd
advocate people go no.
If they can, they definitely should. Especially young people. If you're Black, if you come from a Black or Caribbean background. And again, it's not to say that other races don't have it. They just have it a lot less than Black people do. It's more is a lot more predominant in Black people. You can ask your mom. Sometimes they'll know because it depends on when you were born. They might have done newborn screening for you, and they would have told you at birth what your genotype is. But if you don't know, you can go do a test and to definitely find out. A lot of people often find out that they carry the traits when they have a child. It was obviously the same with my parents. They didn't know until they had me, and then they're like, oh, okay. And so it's like that for a lot of people. We also have a special challenge in Nigeria where even people that go out of their way to test can sometimes get wrong results.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Is that because the efficacy of kind of the process or just bad tests?
It can be both, and then there's also the fact that there's variants of your genotype as well. So not everybody. So it's a bit of a complex thing, and so it's very important for those that can get tested to, if they can. I mean, it's in the UK, if you're in the UK, it's free, so there's no reason why you shouldn't get tested, or at least ask your parents and say, do you know what my genotype is? You should ask your mom.
Yeah, I reckon she knows. Yeah, my mom knows. She knows everything.
Yeah, exactly. You should definitely ask or definitely get tested. And then for people who do carry the trait, this is a question we get asked a lot. Like, okay, I have the trait. I have a partner who has the trait. What should I do? Now, thanks to scientific, there's been a lot of advancements and there are different ways if you want to conceive, that you can without passing down the disease to your child. So obviously there's things like IVF, where you do what they call pre-implantation diagnosis, prenatal diagnosis, all these different types of diagnosis to make sure that you either test when you become pregnant or test or go through the IVF process to ensure that you select embryos that don't carry the disease. Obviously, it's a very complex process. It's not as easy as I'm just saying it. Like, do you get what I mean?
Have your IVF, please.
Just have an IVF, please. It's not that easy. So you have to obviously ask yourself, like, okay, do I want to have kids with this person? If I want to have kids, is this something that we're both willing to go through? Because obviously it's financially and emotionally tasking on people that want to go through the process. But I think in the UK, if both of you carry the sickle cell gene, you can have some IVF on the NHS. Don't quote me on this, but I think so. I think someone has told me that. So there's a lot of things to definitely consider. But what you don't want to do is willingly have children with the disease, because it's not an easy disease to manage at all, and it will obviously affect your child's life, but it will also change your lives as well. Like we work with a lot of carers of people that have kids with sickle cell, and it's not easy. Every time your child's in hospital, it's like you're in hospital as well. Do you know what I mean? It's emotionally and physically tasking. So as much as possible, we would definitely not advocate for people to go out of their way to like willingly just like
we find people that have the same. I mean, is this then what started the work of Haima Health and what you guys sort of do?
Yeah, so the work actually started from supporting people living with sickle cell disease, and the support we were giving them is various ways. So from things like drugs, counseling, but we realized that a lot of people, they need blood when they go into hospital, and so they'll reach out to us and say, oh, hey, I've kind of exhausted my immediate circle, because that's the problem in Nigeria, is that people usually get family replacement donors. So you would get like your brother or your cousin or your friend to come and give you blood when you need it, either to replace blood that you've already used or sometimes directly to the person. And after a while with sickle cell, because you need such frequent blood transfusions, after a while you exhaust your immediate circle, and then you start to like need other people. So we also started by calling our own like friends and family and stuff, and they were like, okay, let's come up with a database of people that want to give blood voluntarily for people with sickle cell. And so we started going out to recruit these donors, and after a while we started getting calls from people that are like, we have a pregnant woman in the hospital, she needs blood, do you know anybody that can come donate? And so we're like, okay, we don't need to actually limit this thing to just people with sickle cell. We're just going to work on blood generally, and we've kind of done like all the different like iterations of the challenges within the blood sector. We're now doing logistics as well, so that's like moving blood from hospital from blood bank to hospital and things like that. So it's really like every aspect of the challenge for getting blood for patients is what we are trying to solve.
Wow. And is that the catchphrase you're trying to solve?
No. No. Our catchphrase is very simple. Give blood, give life. That's our catchphrase. Very simple. That. Yeah.
Oh, I love this. One of my favorite things, which I talk about all the time, and if people are frequent listeners, they'll know. It's just like people who turn sort of pain into purpose. It's just like, it's the most beautiful thing in the world when, like, something that's that can be seen one way, you just turn and it becomes almost your superpower. It becomes your driving force, motivator. But I know, starting businesses or growing social enterprises, that it's not easy.
No.
What are some of the challenges you've had? And here's the reason I asked that question is because with this, there's such a logical solution, And actually, I remember, I had a brief stint in fundraising. I did a lot of fundraising for organizations that I look after, and then I started doing the consulting on fundraising. And one thing we used to always say is fundraising isn't logical, it's emotional. Because if we're thinking about giving money logically or like helping logically, we all should be giving like at least £20 a month towards finding a cure for cancer. Do you know what I mean? That's just a logical thing to say. You've said now one of the biggest issues is transfusions, and so we just need people to give blood. So it's a logical thing to go give blood. But people don't give blood, they don't give money, and they often need to feel almost like an emotional pull
connection as
before
well.
they do it.
Yeah.
And I find that so fascinating because it's like everyone should be supporting your work, but has it felt like that? Has it felt like, oh, everyone we know, we say give blood, everyone gives blood, or
no,
what's the reality?
Giving blood, no. People rather give money, give anything than give blood.
Really?
It's very challenging to
get.
And
the thing is, they can actually reproduce blood. But money in this cost of
no, people don't like it at all. And so I also do some work here with the Sickle Cell Society to recruit blood donors, black blood donors in particular. And it's a challenge. It's just like, number one is there isn't, again, like an awareness that there's a need to give blood. Like, and then a question we always ask is, why do you need my blood in particular? But then we have to kind of explain that because people with sickle cell have such frequent transfusions, it's better to give them ethnically matched blood. You're less likely to have reactions. And then you also have certain types of blood subtypes that are only that you would more likely find within the black community. So trying to kind of explain that's one way. But then generally people just don't. I don't know. I can't even say this is what like is really the challenge in the UK. In Nigeria, I know what the challenges are pretty easily, but here I think. What
are the challenges in Nigeria?
I think the biggest challenge in Nigeria is socioeconomic. So if you are not like comfortable, if you're still thinking about where your next meal is coming from, if you're not like mentally okay in terms of like your socioeconomic status, that's pyramid of needs, right? You need to get to give blood, you need to more likely get to that level of almost self-actualization in order to start thinking about altruistic things like that. Yes.
And helping other people.
Yes, because I think for a lot of people, and that's what a lot of private blood banks in Nigeria do, is that they incentivize people to give blood by either giving them money or giving them food or things like that. If you do that, you get a lot of people give blood, right? Because it's a direct commercial exchange. But in order to get people to give blood like altruistically and just go out of their way to just give, a lot of people, number one, also don't know the need. And then number two, I think there's just a general distrust of the healthcare system. There's some of that here too within the black community. But I think in Nigeria, generally, people just don't trust that, they'll say, oh, we'll give you the blood for free, but when a patient needs it, they have to pay and things like that. Wow. Yeah, so there's like distrust, and oftentimes people don't have good experiences with giving blood, so some of that kind of makes it a little bit tricky.
Wow, I feel like I'm enrolling in the university course. This is so, no, honestly, it's so helpful, especially to have someone so knowledgeable on the topic as well, because if you could make a pitch to people to give blood, what would you say? Because I reckon some people listening and watching this would have seen an NHS banner saying give blood, would have heard of a friend or a friend of a friend that has sickle cell. but maybe they're still not over the edge of
Yeah.
giving blood. And some of it is fear. I remember
Yeah.
asking once, I was like, but what will happen to my blood? Like, will I get it back? Will I be able to make the same amount of blood back? Is there some, all these questions people have? And you said at the start, sometimes people feel a bit silly asking them, so they don't ask. For that reason, people aren't getting over the line. So if you could actually make a pitch or tell people like, yo, here's why you should do this, what would you like? How would you make that pitch to them?
I think the easiest pitch is that people like me rely on it to live. Like, there are lots of people that rely on regular blood transfusions to live. And then also, if you, God forbid, had like an accident or something and you got to the hospital, you don't want to hear how the blood got there, right? You just want the blood to be there. And so how's the blood going to get there? It has to be people giving. Unfortunately, now there isn't like a scientific way you can kind of cook lab blood up in the lab, right? The only way you can get blood is from somebody else for now. Maybe in the future, there will be some kind of magic pill.
That would change everything.
Yeah, and then I will just close up shop and then I'll just go and chill somewhere. But in the meantime, a lot of people will need blood in their lifetimes. A lot of women going to have children also need blood transfusions. And so it's the question of, if you want to go to a hospital and know that if you need blood, it's going to be there, then you also have to, stretch your arm out and give if you can. Not everybody can give blood. There's a lot of limitations and reasons you may not be able to. But if you try, and it's so easy here, you just have to book an appointment, go to the nearest clinic and give. It literally takes 1 hour maximum. If you can, then definitely give it a try. And if you're thinking of something charitable to do instead of giving money, this is the perfect thing to do.
Yeah, this is brilliant. Well, I just think your work has to succeed. Honestly, I think it's so important. And I mean, I feel like this conversation is actually literally why this podcast exists, which is to bring just certain worlds that people aren't naturally in to life, and to go, oh yeah, that's interesting.
That's interesting.
I don't actually think about that often. And obviously it's someone else's reality. And I just think you're doing brilliantly. Obviously we met through QCT, because come of trust, and so they're standing beside you, and we just need more people to stand beside you, really, and just ensure that the work succeeds, because it's more people to give. Work.
I need to follow you when you do your first donation. Have you given before?
Yeah, not yet.
Okay, good.
I know you gave me
the link
to put it in, and I sent it to a few people as well. So I am definitely open to doing it. I'm scared of needles.
Don't worry, it's so easy and so quick. You won't even notice it when it goes in.
But I'm definitely game for doing it. I'm traveling soon, but when I'm back,
once you're settled and you've got some time, I'll come with my phone and video you the whole process. It's true, because oftentimes when you do it, right, it's easier for you to convince your friend to do it. It's like if I'm making a pitch to you to do something, but you've never done it, it's kind of like, but you don't really know what you're talking about, kind of thing. And so oftentimes with friendship groups or family groups, what they've seen in other groups in the UK that give blood more frequently is usually because maybe the dad used to give regularly, and then the child grows up saying, oh, daddy goes to give regularly, and then he goes, and then his friend goes, and so on. And that's kind of how we build a community, doing this stuff. So
no, you're totally right. And this has been probably, for me, the best conversation I think I've heard. And obviously I'm biased, but I've heard on this topic, and it's literally motivating to me to go do something. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
I wish you all the success with everything you're doing, and hopefully we'll check on you like kind of later on in the season or something, and see what updates you have for us from the battlefield, from the mission field. I think it's getting better. People give it more. Who knows?
I know. It'll be good. I'm excited. I never get tired. That's the one thing with this job. It's one of those things that I don't know how much you could pay me to do it. Like, it's just something that I like to do, and I feel like it's just there are some things that you're just naturally motivated to do, which come a lot easier than things that maybe you're paid or forced to do.
Hey, thank you for taking time to watch that video. Here at the Common Sense Network, we thrive on exposing you to different ideas. If you're someone who likes ideas, you like learning new things, hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications so you're first to hear when we have a new video out.